Lucas Marsh here, Engineered Wealth Management. Today, we're going to be talking about the most exciting part of a house. You know that part I'm talking about, that everything is built upon, that everyone loves to fawn over. You have your designer, your architect. Yeah, I'm talking about the foundation of a house. Everything is built upon the foundation. In the same way that your house foundation holds up your entire physical life, your financial foundation holds up your entire financial life. So, quick recap. I know we've been talking about cash flow, knowing what your cash flow is, tracking it, and eventually working towards a surplus. But before you have that surplus go to anywhere exciting or interesting, you need to do one job, and that is build out your financial foundation. And the goal of your financial foundation is to make sure that if you have one bad month or one big expense, that it is not a financial reset, but just an inconvenience where you're able to quickly recover from. And that's where having an emergency fund as well as insurance, if you need it in place, is that financial foundation that everything else is built upon. So I know the common discussion is have an emergency fund 3 to 6 months, but what exactly does that mean? What exactly should 3 to 6 months of mean? How do you run those calculations or those guidelines? So 3 to 6 months, these should be your fixed expenses. So if we're talking about cash flow, again, these are your needs. These are not your wants or your discretionary income. So what do you need to continue to live and have the lights on? So things like housing, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments, food, childcare, that sort of stuff. This should not be including travel or eating out or discretionary funds in this. If you're in a real emergency, hopefully you would have the thoughtfulness and mindset to not be eating out or going on some extravagant trip. And I think the key takeaway, at least as far as the guidelines of the calculations, is, that 3 to 6 months of emergency funds of needed funds is actually a lot smaller and less intimidating than people assume. And that's the goal here, is to help you guys identify that number and work towards it. So how do you determine your emergency fund? How do you know if it should be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? Well, there's a number of factors that play into that. So are you a single income household, dual income household, have more than 2 incomes? How are those incomes related? Are you work for the same person? Are you in business together? You work for the same company? You work for the same industry? So, do you have concentration risk in a specific area, or do you have a diversified risk where you're in different industries, different companies, different market cycles, so your risks are not tied together? Additionally, looking at job security, how realistically may it be that you may end work? Are you W-2? Are you contract? Are you 1099? How stable is that job? Then also thinking about realistically, if you did need to find another job, how long would that take? So are you a nurse or a teacher or something where there is always employment and always opportunities? Or do you have a very specialized set of knowledge and skills and it may take you 3, 6, 12 months to find a job? Obviously, if you have variable income where you are paid through commissions or some sort of productivity and your income can swing every month, needs to play into that, as well as self-employment. Again, if you're working 1099 or some sort of commission or contract work, your month-to-month income can swing wildly. And then number of dependents, if you have kids or adults or parents or animals living with you, make sure you take into consideration their needs and the costs associated with sustaining them as dependents. So again, thinking about the amount of income, how many incomes, the concentration risk of employer industry, job stability, income variability, all of that should play into how much of an emergency fund you have. And just to be clear here, that an emergency fund is really for an emergency. So this is you lose your job, you have some sort of medical event where you're admitted to a hospital or need a procedure, or have a major home issue, you have a tree fall through your roof, or you have a catastrophic vehicle failure. This is not to save up for vacation or Christmas. Expenses like that, where you have a known upcoming expense, should be in a separate account, separate video if you guys are interested. So how do we size our emergency fund? So we are both W-2 employees right now. We both work in healthcare currently, but separate sides of healthcare, separate employers. So not a whole lot of risk there. We did end up ending on 6 months of income. And again, what I discussed earlier in the video, again, this is not the current amount of funds that you spend every month. This is your fixed obligations. What do you need in funding to keep the lights on? And so we ended up with just about 6 months. The other good thing about 6 months, and I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit, but with short and long-term disability, short-term disability usually caps out at about 6 months. And so having a 6-month emergency fund can really eliminate that need and transfer some of the risk back to you, which is a cost savings. So we talked about the emergency fund. If you are unable to fund something out of emergency fund, you don't need to self-insure that risk, you transfer it. And that is basically the definition of insurance. So a couple insurances that I want to talk through here. I believe pretty much the most overlooked insurance is that of disability insurance. So this is occupational insurance. So if you get sick or injured through an accident and are unable to work, that's really overlooked by a large majority of the population. So making sure that paycheck continues to come in month after month. And so we do tap into disability insurance just to make sure that we do have that paycheck coming in. I mentioned short versus long term. You may have some employer options with disability insurance. Most employers have some sort of short-term disability option that I would encourage you to look into. But as I mentioned, it usually caps at about 6 months, and there may be a waiting or an elimination period, as it's called, before it starts. And so that sort of emphasizes the importance of having an emergency fund. One other thing to keep in mind with disability insurance is that if your employer pays the premium, if you ever have to tap into that disability insurance, any income from that is taxable. Whereas if you are paying the insurance premiums entirely yourself, after tax, there is no tax on that income. So if you are talking through the disability insurance process with a company or an agent, just remember that majority of the time, if you are paying the premiums yourself, that income is tax-free. Life insurance, majority% of the time, term life is going to be the best bet for most people. There are some rare instances where a different product or a different type of insurance may be beneficial. But if you think of term life insurance as you are renting insurance, whereas a permanent type life insurance product is where you own it. So it is and can be very expensive to own insurance, whereas if you are renting insurance for a specific period, that's where term comes into play, and it can be dramatically cheaper than owning some sort of permanent life insurance product. And so the goal here is to identify, what are kind of the key milestones in your life where income's going to be required. Kids at the house, sending them to college. After that, are you still going to need to work? Are there other big expenses that may need to be paid off? Your mortgage of your house. So looking out that time frame, and then what is it going to cost to pay those off? There's a lot of calculators out there on the internet that could help you estimate term life products and the amount and duration that you would need. And again, we do use a term life here for us. And the last little bit here I'm going to say is that I do not sell any insurance. I'm not licensed to, and I do not get paid if anyone or any of my clients buy insurance from someone. So again, I am a fee only advisor, do not sell insurance, do not get paid from any insurance products. So I know I discussed kind of a lot of insurance types there. Happy to deep dive into any of those in the future if you guys let me know what you're interested in hearing about. So last little topic we're going to talk about here is, you have this 3, 6, 9, 12 months worth of funds that you need to tap into sitting around, and that money is not working for you. And I realize that a lot of people think that market crashes or the market owning stocks is a risk. There is risk associated with that, but the real risk associated with holding money in a cash account is inflation. And that inflation slowly eats away your purchasing power. So, how do we find that right balance of having an emergency fund, but at the same time making sure our emergency fund is always 6 months worth of expenses or 9 months of expenses versus, a 6-month emergency fund slowly eroding to a 3-month emergency fund. There's some trade-offs there. There's various sort of categories that you can use to house these funds. There's going to be trade-offs, again, like I said, depending on the speed of which you need access, the yield or how much the funds pay you for your money, and then the tax treatment, kind of a triangle, one of those things where you may be able to get 2 of the 3, but you're not ever going to be able to find all 3 of those things in a single fund. So just some high level here about each of these categories. These are high yield savings accounts. So these are generally what you would have in a bank. These are more or less immediate access and are FDIC insured. These are pretty simple, but are usually paying the lowest yield of any of the options. Next we have is a money market fund, and this is held through a brokerage. This is not FDIC insured. This is SIPC insured. And so this is a separate thing from FDIC, where if a brokerage goes out of business, it does not cover market losses. It covers specifically if the brokerage house goes out of business. But money market funds generally pay a higher amount, but it may take a day or 2 to settle. So you cannot access your funds same day, but maybe a day or 2 to settle. Also, the next on the list is Treasury bills. So these are the shortest maturity of U.S. Treasuries that are sold. And these durations usually from 1 to 3 months. You can buy these directly, or you can access them through a mutual fund or an ETF. So the yield's going to be a bit higher than a money market fund, but also a bit more impacted by interest rate volatility, as well as kind of settling. If you have to buy and sell these again, so it takes a couple of days to settle. However, interest from government securities like Treasury bills are generally exempt from state income tax. So there's that last bit of benefit there. And then lastly, CDs, certificates of deposit. If you aren't going to need the funds, 3, 6 months, then you may be able to tap into that. But again, that really defeats the point of having an emergency fund that you can tap into when needed over the course of a day or 2. Just making sure that like I mentioned, there are some CDs that have longer periods where you may get a higher rate, just being mindful of the lockup period if you're buying a CD or a bond or some other fund for your emergency fund. You want to make sure you can get access to those, as well as price risk. You don't want anything where the price is volatile or even moves that much. If you put $100 in, you're expecting to get $100 out when you have an emergency. So anyways, that kind of wraps up the discussion about emergency funds and where to keep them. I know I talked about a number of concepts here that could be their own videos themselves. So open to suggestions. If you guys have anything you want to hear about, please let me know in the comments. as with always, thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, let your friends know, forward this to anyone who may be interested, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Before we wrap up, a quick note. This content is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not personalized investment, tax, or legal advice. Every person's financial situation is different, and you should consult with your own qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making decisions based upon what we discussed today. Engineered Wealth Management is a fee-only registered investment advisor. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. If you'd like to learn more about how we work, including our services and fees, you can find our Form ADV and important disclosures on our website. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.